Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Agile Couple. So today we're just going to have a conversation about basically learning and development organizations, kind of moving from the traditional more to a kind of an employee-owned type of learning. And Leanne is actually going to be presenting at ATD coming up in May. And this is going to be one of the topics that she's talking about. So with that being said, Leanne, why don't you give us a little bit of a lowdown as far as what you're going to be talking about coming up here at ATD?
Sure. Well, ATD is a large international organization in the training and development world, if you've never heard of it. So there's a big conference in LA, May, I think it's the 17th through the 20th. And so I'm going to have a speaking session on the 19th, and I'm excited. And the session is called Team Learning, Rethinking Development for Real Growth, Motivation, and Impact. And it's a whole knowledge in action session, which just means we're going to make it hands-on and try and have the learners take away experiences so they understand the difference between the traditional lecture, task-oriented kind of learning to more empowerment of the learners in the room and why that matters and how you learn with other people. So, it's kind of fun. But Kevin and I have been in this world for a long time. And our business partner, also Winston, like we have focused and are really heavily focusing on this in the upcoming year. We talked about putting together a conference and building what we call a facilitator enablement program. So for facilitators, which facilitator is different than a trainer or an instructor, it can include those. It would encapsulate those, right? But there's a lot of people who are in the transfer of knowledge. So talk about that for a second. Just when we say facilitator, what do we mean?
Yeah, so basically the facilitator is somebody who is not what we can commonly refer to as sage on the stage, where your typical instructor, when they're giving information, it's kind of a one-way communication, right? And what a facilitator is focused on is more creating an environment where you're building kind of this social learning, and you're putting more of the onus on the participants to own their learning and be able to go through, social networking and social learning with their peers, as opposed to just listening to, somebody talk about a particular topic. And I think one of the things that if we kind of look at the traditional way that training sometimes occurs within organizations, it's kind of check the box. You have required learning. It's very task oriented. And it's more focusing on the output, right? Which is, did you do this? Yes or no? Yep, I did. Not, did you actually get something out of it? And more importantly, did that training provide something that has a direct impact on your day-to-day, how you go about operating, how the organization is growing as well? So it's more of a focus moving from output to outcomes.
Yeah.
And you can talk about this in a little bit more detail, but one of the things that we found is rather than just having, kind of like the toy box of examples that don't have any application to, an organization or particular team's daily work, what we found is when we can have an understanding of how they're working and then be able to build the learning around something that is very applicable to how they go about doing their job, that also creates a lot more retention and a lot more applicability, so that the training, that investment has got a much higher return on investment, because of that. So what are your thoughts and kind of experiences with regard to that applied learning approach that we take?
So I had an airline client where I would do a lot of transfer of knowledge, I'll say. Like they were looking for training, and I slowly started to change what they were doing. But like they wanted Excel. We all need to get skilled up, but the expertise and understanding and usability of Excel varied and ran the gamut. So I actually said, well, let's do this. Send me for this. And thankfully it was like a group of like same type of job. I said, send me some of the things you're working on. And then what are you trying to do?
Yeah.
Because half the time they don't know what the outcome is. What are you trying to get to? What is it that we're trying to align to, so that if people are going to be skilled up where you need it instead of just learning features, right? And that was highly successful. They loved it. It's more work on my end, right? Because I have to understand your verbiage. I don't work in an airline. So I had to understand what the things were. And then what are we trying to do? And it was awesome. It was so much fun. we've done that with software engineering teams and with our large clients. We've aligned that to what the organizations are doing so that they're learning software development techniques, languages, pipelines, like whatever it is, in that company's environment.
Right.
That's much more useful than going to a one-off class going, here's everything about the SDLC life or the, pipeline and how CI/CD works or whatever. So the same thing is applied for just power users or regular teams where you've got business people. So we do a lot of, let's talk about DISC, let's talk about Working Genius. It's around customizing it for who the people are.
Yeah.
Where are they at? Where do they need to work on? So alignment to something, I think, is the most important thing.
Yeah. Well, one of the other things that we found too that's really effective when you have those type of environments where, one, you've got everybody working on something and being trained on something that's got application to their actual job. The other thing is when you're building up that ownership, it's not you as the facilitator that owns it. Instead,
Exactly.
You're transferring that to those that are actually going through the training themselves. And what it does, because like you said, you've got variants of different skill levels. You may have somebody that's more advanced than somebody who is just learning it. And then obviously you got a lot of people kind of just in a bell curve right in the middle. But one of the things that we found too is when you identify those individuals that have maybe a little bit more experience, you kind of tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, this person's struggling with this,
Yes.
And then we start getting into that pairing and that modeling that we've talked about before. And it kind of gives the little endorphin rush for the person who knows more because now they can, impart their knowledge. So
And they're not bored.
Yeah, they're not bored.
Yeah.
Right. And I think, one of the things that I've always done when I've been in a classroom setting or some type of training is I always level set right out of the gate.
Right.
And it's like, especially with adult learners, because you're not dealing with, kids in high school and middle school. That's a totally different way of going about learning. But with adults, it's a matter of, I always say, listen, this is going to be a conversation amongst professionals, right? I've got certain expertise and experience, but each one of you has got certain skills and experience that you can bring to this conversation as well. And that's one of the things that, we've talked about that we love about training is every time we go through, it doesn't matter what the topic is, we learn something
Always,
as well,
yeah.
right? So once again, as a facilitator, you're trying to create those environments and create those opportunities where people are comfortable with sharing their experience and also having the humility to be able to recognize that not everybody's at the same point. And that's, we take a much more holistic approach because we're also focusing on that emotional intelligence aspect that's important in today's workforce is you need to be able to communicate, with other human beings in a way that you're able to, progress a conversation.
Yeah.
And that social aspect and incorporating them into the learning is really important. So with that being said, as far as that ownership, what are some of the things that you've experienced and maybe one or two really successful events that you've had where, somebody really steps up and kind of
Like changes what's happening.
Yeah, exactly.
All the time, actually, but it's all based on what you kind of said. So this is the number one thing. So I'm going to get to your question, but first I'm going to level set. We work with facilitators, trainers, instructors globally, right? And a lot of them have been doing it for a long time.
Yeah.
It's actually harder to change your mindset on how to do this, how to manage the room.
Right.
But if you understand this and you can buy in, and you need to have the experience yourself, because it's all about experience, right?
Yep.
But when you kick it off and you level set the room with the expectations, like when we're dealing with new software engineers, we say, you're not in university anymore. Raise your hand if you're a paid professional, and everybody in the room raises their hand, including me, right? So, okay, so we're gonna collaborate and we're gonna learn together. And there's some things we aren't gonna know, and whoever can figure it out, great. Let's share with the group.
Yep.
Is there going to be 6 different ways that we can get to the same thing? Yeah. And is one way better than the other? Maybe not. Maybe we're just learning from one another. Right. So it's the humility part of being able to say, we try and teach other facilitators that have been doing this for a long time. When we say sage on the stage, that is a typical lecturer. That is somebody who has to own the conversation, lead the conversation. They need to show you how to do it. They do all the things. that's not very fun and that's not very engaging, and it doesn't actually increase retention usually for the learners in the room. So you have to shift your mindset to go, I'm already, when you walk in the room, you assume that I'm already the expert. That's why I'm in the room. So our job when we hire somebody is we make sure that they are the expert, but we also are looking to make sure that they can adapt and they can take in the audience and they can learn to back away and more facilitate the session.
Yeah.
So that's what we're talking about when we say
It's not
facilitator.
about us as a facilitator. It's about them.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you can do that and you kick it off and you set it and sometimes you have to repeat it and people are uncomfortable with it. We've joked because a lot of times I'll make teams stand up. Somebody made a mistake and I say, hey, we believe in failure. As long as you're not repeating the same problem, then we want to celebrate that, right? If you keep repeating it, then you're not paying attention. You're doing something wrong. But that's an uncomfortable thing. But then they start to feel uncomfortableness leads you to a place where you can be very comfortable, awkwardly, right? And they start to go, okay, we can let the shields down a little bit and we can actually learn because I don't have to be perfect. It's not about all the things. It's about being honest and saying, I don't totally understand that, or I don't have any experience. Everybody else in here seems to understand AI. I don't understand AI, or whatever it is. And you're going to get to the real learning and the real connection and the real retention when you can do that.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I gave you a specific example.
No, that's good.
Yeah. But we do it all the time.
Yeah.
But it's more about the scaffolding. How are you setting up the mindsets for the people in the room?
Yeah.
People with other people is the most challenging thing. The thing you're teaching, not that hard. You can have 1,000 different examples. They can follow labs. They can do all these things, but the retention is always going to grow when people are collaborating with others, learning with somebody else explaining something back because maybe the facilitator kicks it off and gives some, explain encapsulation to me, and you explain it. And then half the room is like, I'm going to shake my head like I got it, but I don't get it. And then you sit with the room and I've got somebody over here and I say, I didn't understand encapsulation. And then we have Katie who's sitting over here who explains it in a way that it's a totally different real world explanation. I go, oh, like a Tootsie Roll Pop, right? Or whatever the scenario is. That's learning. That's what we're going for. It's not about did you give every piece of what they're going to learn. It's about the collective room.
Yeah. And I think what it does too is, especially for those that are transitioning from the traditional instructor trainer into that facilitator mode, the feedback that we've gotten from the folks we work with as they've moved into that transition, they love it because what it does is it frees them up to focus on the higher value, which is being able to, provide guidance, to be able to provide information in a much more conversational type of setting. It's not just that one-way communication. Instead, you've got this whole organic, teams that are working together and they're asking the questions. And especially when you have that humility factor in there and they understand it's okay to fail, right? Fail, first attempt in learning.
Great.
Right?
Yeah.
We emphasize that as well. And in doing so, they're able to grow during that period of time. That's like we've had last year, there was one classroom in particular, and we had one person in my classroom. And first day, it's like they were like from outside of the area, so they didn't really have any friends. Went through this 2 weeks of training, and on that very last day, he said to the group, he said, I came in here and everybody here was my peer, but I can honestly say today everybody is my friend.
Yeah.
Right?
There's a confidence thing in
and that human component.
The networking
Yeah,
that
that human component is so important. So
well, there was something you said that I was just gonna go off of, but my old lady brain just totally lost it. It flew away. I don't know. All I can say is it's a whole feeling. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Some people who are super structured, right? The more analyzer type person has typically a harder time with this. You don't need to be strict. You don't need to, especially when we're talking about adult learning, people need to own their own learning. So if you have disruptive people, whatever, that's a different scenario, but you've got to back away. No, not being structured. I'm not saying don't have structure, but the overly structured things like lead, don't think opens up for the same ability. And the more structured and rigid you are, you're working against yourself. You're just not going to have the same experience in the whole room. And there's the mastermind or third mind effect that you're not allowing that can happen. Because when you go, here's the general place that we're going to go. I'm going to give you like the idea. Here's your time box for this. Here's what we're going to do. I can give you an example, or you can go and walk through, and then we can come back and debrief. Give them the ownership and how they want to get there.
Yeah.
At the end, what are the outcomes we're trying to get, right? When you have that, you're planned, you're prepared, you know what they're going to run into. So I'm not saying we don't have those things. You still have those things, but it's almost like you have a plan, but you don't have an agenda. And that's the thing that is a mindset for somebody who's leading a room, I think is the biggest thing. It's the hardest thing. And we've seen it so many times. I just went through it recently, just a couple weeks ago with somebody. And I said, you're way too strict and you're rigid, right? This whole thing, they don't know, that you've stopped that creativity and exploration that they have because this is how the mindset you've set up in the room.
Yeah.
So you have to practice it. And the best way to practice it, I think, is to go and experience it with somebody else. So if you can come and you can watch somebody else who models it, it looks so easy and it actually becomes less hard. It's not like you're doing less work, but it's less stressful on you when you understand it and then you can deliver something that way. Every time I have people who are like, oh my God, that like a light bulb went off. That was so much easier. Yeah, it is because you're part of the room. You're just facilitating the learning, right? But anyway, so there's more to come on this. This is an area that we feel like is really important. With AI coming into the picture, I think it's becoming even more important. Like you can go out to AI and you can ask it all kinds of things and you can set up your own plans, but that's not the same thing as learning together. And you don't have the mastermind effect with AI. You don't have all of those things that you do get when you're collaborating. So what would you end this with your perspective about learning and just what we're talking about?
Yeah, I think it's definitely been going through a transition. And I think the most successful learning environments now is when you integrate, and it's not an us versus them. It's not the instructor just given that one way. Instead, once again, you're trying to create that environment. And most importantly, you have to have examples that are applicable to the audience. The more that you can make it custom to their particular environment and closer to what they're going to be dealing with when they go back to their office, the more successful it's going to be.
Yeah. So if you have curiosity or interest, you want to talk about it more, you can respond on our YouTube, probably the easiest place, but you can reach out to our email address, which I think will be tied to the podcast. And we're happy to have more conversations or whatever. If you want to continue this with other areas, this is the area of passion that we're going to be definitely exploring. And if you're in LA or coming to the ATD conference, it would be awesome. I don't know what room I'm going to be in, but I do know it'll be Tuesday, May 19th from 1 to 2, right after lunch. You'll have a full belly. We'll have a good time. It's going to be interactive. So
awesome.
Thanks for joining us for our episode. We'll see you next time.
Take care.